Okay, welcome, welcome. I hope everyone is excited to learn about weather tonight because that's what we're going to dive into. If you want to drop in the chat, let us know if you're a student pilot, an instrument pilot, if you're working on commercial. I'd love to see where you're at and where you're training. I'm currently in Cadillac, Michigan, and I'm finishing up my CFI in commercial. So student pilot, awesome. Aileen, well, this is going to be extremely useful. Is anyone close to a check ride or working on getting ready for their written? Okay, awesome. Pam, you're working on a check ride or your written? Is everyone else able to hear? Doesn't look like it. Yeah, it should be working. Let's see, share computer audio. Yeah. Okay. Can everyone hear? Okay. Fantastic.
Okay, am
Okay.
I connected?
Yes, you're good,
Okay,
Pam.
all right.
No worries. We were just sharing if we're a student pilot, an instrument pilot, what we're working on, if it's a check ride, or if you're getting ready for a written maybe, or just wanting to learn more about weather. This is going to be your one-stop shop about all of that. So weather, if you don't already know, is abbreviated WX by pilots. If you ever get a text message that says WIX, that's what they're talking about. It's just the abbreviated version of weather. And it looks like we've got a couple student pilots in here and in California. Okay, cool. So feel free to share where you're at in your training and where you're located. But we're going to dive right in because we've got a lot to cover. So as a student pilot, we're going to learn a lot of things that are relative to becoming a safer private pilot. Now, weather still accounts for a huge amount of GA accidents. As we can see, it's 27% of all fatal accidents. I know this is kind of boring, but this is where we're going to learn what's really important. And the low ceilings and visibility are the biggest. Now, how can we avoid low ceilings and visibility? Does anyone know about the temperature dew point spread yet, or are we still learning about it? How if it's smaller and converging, then we're more likely to get moisture in the air, which leads to clouds and fog, things that will eventually take away our visibility. Now, NOTAMs is generally where I start because if we don't know what's going on in the airports, we don't know if they're open or closed. It would be very upsetting if we made this beautiful flight plan and spent a half an hour briefing it to find out we actually can't go shoot approaches at that airport or land there on our cross country that we're planning. Weather's the second. Who knows NW craft by heart? Anybody can drop it in the chat or shout it out. I think I see I've been in PPL check ride prep forever. Well, hopefully we can help at least with the weather portion of that, Pam. Known ATC delays, yep. And then got a couple more runway lengths, alternates, fuel requirements, and our takeoff and landing distances. This is the lovely NW craft. There's actually a little checklist in ForeFlight that you can use for this too, but we'll get to that in a minute. Welcome, Amy, and feel free to drop in the chat where you're at in your training and what you are working on right now. So obtaining weather briefings, there's a few different options that we have. It has to be FAA approved, and that means it comes from a FAA source such as NOAA or NWS. So ForeFlight. Is anyone a ForeFlight user in the audience? No? Okay, we've got other options. Cool. Do we have Garmin users? Could you a thumbs up? No. No. Okay, cool. Well, what do you use for weather? Do you just call 1-800-WX-BRIEF? FLT plan, if you don't know, is a free version. That one's amazing. Garmin Pilot, we can always call the phone number if we're stuck, and that's our big options. So we're going to start at the synopsis and looking at prog charts, radars. They break it down into PIREPs, METARs, TAFs, and our local weather. First, we've got our surface analysis charts. These are updated every 3 hours, and they depict frontal and pressure systems. This is really important because if we are planning on flying in the next couple days and we look at the surface analysis chart and see a whole lot of cold fronts moving in and low pressure systems, we may not be having that flight, which is helpful if you're trying to schedule around other students or just your own personal schedule, finding times that are actually going to be clear weather. We're looking for high pressure systems and generally not a lot of troughs or cold fronts in the area. This is a basic surface analysis chart. We've got this one with radar. So does anyone know the difference between radar and satellite images? Awesome. Well, that's why we're here. So radar is basically just precipitation in the air. We're looking at whether on ForeFlight or a different app, it's basically just showing us how heavy that precipitation is. So this is completely unuseful for figuring out where the clouds are or what's happening in that sense. The surface analysis chart for clouds looks like this, and it's satellite images. We can see here there's an occluded front, and fortunately, all of this information is located on the FAA's awesome Aviation Weather Handbook. I'm actually going to drop in the chat this resource that I made for everybody with all the different websites that you can see for free. And let's see, my computer, so fun. There's the file button. All right, well, it looks like I can't drop files in here. If you go ahead and shoot me a message with your email, I'll make sure you get that PDF sent over, and it has all the clickable links. But this is a big one, the FAH 8083, and this handbook has everything weather related. It's a little dry, but there's more useful resources inside of it. We've also got the FAA Wings program. Jetstream by NOAA is extremely helpful if you wanted to dive into further topics. And we're going to see if we can actually share that right here. Other resources. So we do have a TAP key, and this is from the FAA, basically just a breakdown of what those lovely symbols mean that you're going to see on the written, as well as having a designated pilot examiner ask when you do the weather briefing for your check ride. They're going to go line by line and ask what everything means, and you're going to have to read it to them. So this should be able to be shared in here. Let's see if we can copy this. Share. No, doesn't look like it. Okay, I'll try it in one more option. But so we've got our latest service as well. Does everyone know that the FAA created a service that will text you a decoded version of the TAFs and METARs? So if there's a METAR that's at your home airport and it looks kind of weird, just text this number 358-782, which is flight service, and you can type in METAR and whatever airport you want, and it'll just instantly tell us what the METAR is, which is kind of cool. I think it's useful, especially if it's something that I'm unfamiliar with when I'm studying. I'll go ahead and see what that means. Let's do one right now. Who's got a home airport that they prefer to fly at? What is Folsom, California? Oh, Kent? I like it. Okay. Let's go back over to here. And this is going to be pretty interactive because the flight planning process is a very interactive and fluid. So 358-782. And you can see I've already used this a few times. I think Kent was the one I saw first. Okay, let's do TYL because that one just popped up easily. So what we're gonna do is METAR, TYL, and then PT at the end basically just tells them we want it in plain text. And we should have that sent over in a minute. That phase, not exactly instant, but oh, it's actually, it looks like my cell signal maybe isn't working. So we're gonna continue on and that should come up within a couple minutes. So air mets, we've got 3 different kinds. They're valid for 6 hours. And this is a warning, especially for smaller aircraft, but it is concern for everybody. The first air met that we have is Sierra. And I remember Sierra by you can't see anything. It's for IFR conditions, mountain obscurations. For everyone who lives in California and flies out there, do not take air met Sierras lightly because it's very easy to mistakenly end up on the path of a canyon or in a mountain because it doesn't seem like there's anything below it, but the mountains are really obscured. This is another way I remember it. The Sierra Madre Mountains are a good mnemonic. Tango is turbulence, low level wind shear, and sustained surfaces for 30 knots or more. I actually had a student on his check ride. He only knew the turbulence, and sometimes the DPEs will dig and say, okay, what else does Tango fall under? It's good to know all 3 of these. And it'll show up on a chart like this. It's usually either orange or tangerine for turbulence, and it tells us it's high in the levels that it's at. So almost everything in aviation, we're going to add 2 zeros. So this is flight level 270 or 27,000 feet up to 430 or 43,000 feet. And then the low level wind shear is actually in a different color. So it's more like a maroon. And Zulu, our last air met, is for icing conditions. I actually got my instrument up in Michigan and we had air met Zulus almost every single day because I did it in winter, which I do not recommend to try to do an instrument rating in winter. It got a little difficult with the reschedules. And you can remember this one by it's freezing with a Z and SIGMET. So these are severe conditions concerning all aircraft, valid for 4 hours. And we've got severe turbulence or icing make up these, volcanic ash and convective activity. So you have convective SIGMETs, which hopefully nobody's ever flown through or desires to fly through. Awesome. And thunderstorms are a huge part of the private pilot check ride. They're going to ask you how do thunderstorms form, why are thunderstorms a concern, and what are the dangers associated with thunderstorms. So first, we've got 3 key ingredients. Does anyone know what those ingredients are to make a thunderstorm? No? Okay. Heat, moisture. Yeah. So heat is actually the #1 driving force for weather change. And moisture is a part of it. Updrafts, unstable lapse rate. Yeah. So the way that the FAA phrases it and how I recommend on your check ride saying it, lifting force, moisture, unstable lapse rate. And that's all we need. It looks like Amy got it. There is the ability for thunderstorms to form in situations that aren't necessarily updrafts. So like next to mountains, it'll be just the wind flow up the side of the mountain can form it. And I'm not sure if anybody saw, but the big fire out in the Grand Canyon, it created its own weather system, and that was starting to create thunderstorms. So pretty wild. There's three main stages. So we've got the cumulus, which is basically just cumulus clouds that are building up. We see those buildups all the time in the afternoon when we're flying. And mature is when what happens? How do we know when the mature stage goes? Any guesses? Lightning. Not necessarily, but lightning is always associated with thunder. So what they ask in the written, yeah, Amy's got it. In the written exam and as well in the private pilot check ride, it's whenever precipitation starts to hit the ground. So as soon as rainfall happens, it's in the mature stage. And what about dissipating? Why do we care if a thunderstorm's in the dissipating stage? Are there any dangers associated with that? Yeah, downdrafts. Absolutely. And they can be up to 2,000 feet per minute, sometimes up to 4,000 feet per minute, depending on where you are. So very important to stay away from thunderstorms. They include severe turbulence, lightning, hail, icing, tornadoes, wind shear, and microbursts. That's a whole nother topic on its own with microbursts. What about how far should we be flying away from a thunderstorm? If it's 10 miles away, are we going to launch? Or I think Pam is mouthing something. What do you think the FAA puts on the number? 20. Yes. Do you know the other recommendation for how far away we should be flying? Because hail can still go sometimes up to 50 nautical miles away. So there's another rule of thumb that I've always used, and that's 10 nautical miles for every 1,000 feet of vertical development. So when I was training in Florida, oftentimes these cells would be 40 or 50,000 feet high. Just make sure that you're staying the appropriate distance depending on how tall those cells actually are. And we get a repeat here. Okay, on to terminal aerodrome forecasts. What do we use a TAF for? Do we have any suggestions? Like, is this for a cross-country trip or is it just for the local area? IFR flights, definitely. So TAFs are valid for what distance away from an airport? It's this terminal. So we're only looking at a forecast and it's within that 5 statute mile radius of the airport. It's only really useful if we're going along a flight and we're seeing what those individual airports are forecasting. It's not real-time weather though. So I always use a TAF as a supplement, but not necessarily like a go or no-go decision forecast, because they have been wrong quite a few times. These are issued 4 times a day, valid for 24 hours, and some can reach up to 30 hours. These are for more busy airports that have a lot of jet traffic and commercial activities. They need a longer forecast period in order to satisfy all the requirements of their flights. And this is what a TAF looks like. Anyone familiar with how to read these? Okay, a little bit. Cool, cool. So we've got a specie on here, it looks like. No, we don't. Just kidding, because that is a METAR. We do have some activity down here. So who wants to be a brave soul and try to read this? We can work through it together. I'm actually going to bring up the document that has all of the breakdown of it. So I'll read the first one, and then if someone would like to volunteer for OKC, we can work through that together. So the way that a TAF is formatted, it's always the airport first. So this is at MEM or Memphis, and it has the day of the month. So it's the 12th day of the month, and then the time in Zulu. So 12:20 Zulu, and then it's also telling us the valid period. So it's 24 hours, and we've got from the 12th day of the month at 1800 Zulu to the 13th day of the month, 2400 Zulu. I know it's kind of weird. You just have to memorize that because it's a strange format. And we've got winds. So winds are always in three numbers on TAFs. So winds are 200 at 12 knots, 5 statute miles. There's some haze and it's broken at 3,000. Probability of 40% that between this period of 2,000 Zulu or 2000 to 2200 Zulu, there's going to be 1 statute mile and thunderstorms and rain. Overcast at 800 and CB is cumulonimbus. That's the only type of clouds that we ever get in forecasts because cumulonimbus means thunderstorms. So we care about CBs, everything else is not really relevant. I think I saw Amy's got most of it. Okay, so Amy, let's have you do the next line, and then Corey, we'll have you do the one after that.
All right. So we're going with the from line.
Yeah, right here from.
All right. It's from the 12th day at 2200. Wind is 330 at 15, gusting 20. Visibility is greater than 6 statute miles. It's broken at 1500, overcast at 2500. The probability is 4,000.
So, sorry, 40% probability.
Or 40% probability. I'm sorry.
You're good.
From 1220 to 1222, it's going to be 3 statute miles and rain showers.
Yeah, yeah. So, the only other thing that was amazing, by the way, you did great. So because this is over a 2-day period, they're adding in the date and the time here as well. So, oh no, sorry, just kidding. You were right. You're so right. I had a long day and it's like 8. It's almost 9 o'clock here in the Eastern time. Okay, Corey, you are next. Great job, Amy. Nailed it. Okay. Or having issues with the muting. Zoom just changed everything and it gets really fun. Oh, microphone isn't working. That's okay. All right. Well, I think you ladies got it. It's really just practice with TAFs and double checking because the precipitation on there is also the only thing that has a negative or a positive. So whenever we see a negative in front of it, it's talking about rain because precipitation or snow, anything that's precipitation related will have the light or the heavy markers. So light is negative and heavy is a plus. And METARs. So METARs are actually real-time data. It's an observation that someone most likely at a tower is issuing. It stands for Meteorological Aerogen Report. And these are issued every hour, except for the species, those are more often. And that's as needed. So if there's thunderstorms rolling in or fog or haze, we actually have a lot of species in Michigan right now because of the wildfires. And so here we've got a specie for JFK and same format. So 12th day of the month, 1853 Zulu, winds are 180, 4 knots, half statute mile of fog. And the rain, or yeah. This is the type of precipitation identifier, and then overcast 500. And we've got our temperature, dew point, and our altimeter setting. So because these are only 2 degrees between each other, that's why we have really low overcast clouds at 500 feet and fog as well. So how do we make a no-go or go decision? What are the qualifying factors that we as future pilots or current pilots are going to make? Do you have personal minimums? And are they written down? The AOPA has these awesome little contracts that you can write and sign. The most important thing is to actually use them when we're flight planning, because often we can look at the weather and be like, wow, it's kind of clearing up, or it's not that bad. And we have to continually make these go and no-go decisions throughout our flight. The moment that we get to the airport, if we want to follow up with a briefer and give them a call and see what they have to say, or possibly we maybe want to give the airport that we're intending on going to a call a local flight school and say, how is it looking? Are you guys having weather that's not being talked about in these forecasts? Because there's a lot of smaller fields that don't actually report weather or have limited sources for it. And speaking of that, how many of you ladies watch the AOPA air safety videos? No? Okay, cool. Well, I highly suggest that you check them out. And we're actually going to watch a quick clip of one. They survived, thankfully, so no need to brief that. But this just shows how quickly weather can change when we're flying VFR.
Monterey, a bit north of Monterey, I would say about 20 miles north, there's a small hilly terrain. It's called Mamulique. So when we approached this place, this hilly terrain, we noticed that there was an overcast layer above the hills, but there was a gap between the hills and the overcast. So we thought nothing about it, and we were planning just to go above the hills in that small gap of VFR conditions. When we got to the hilly terrain, the turbulence, was very, very hard, very, very tough turbulence. It was moving the plane from one side to another, and I got scared. And I was holding on to my cell phone and to the seat, and I was trying not to tell him what to do. He's a pilot, and I didn't want to distract him. He had a job to do. But it got worse. We were just being hammered all over the place. And I was afraid that we were going to hit the side of a hill. So I told him, Arturo, we might just have to climb. And he said, yeah, I think it's best. So he punched the power, pulled the nose up, and we started climbing. Unfortunately, when we climbed, we got into IMC, instrument conditions. And the plane is VFR, but we didn't have a choice. Once we were IMC, I told him, Arturo, remember your training, you're IFR rated. I know this is not an IFR plane, but just keep your heading, you know what to do. And I just thought, I'm not gonna bug him with the details. He's a pilot. I don't wanna tell him what to do. So I was grabbing on, and the only thing I could see in front of me was the back of his head and his shoulders. I think no more than 10 or 15 seconds passed, and I was looking at the side. There's 2 small windows. That's all the visibility I had. And looking at the left window, I all of a sudden saw sky, and then ground again, and then sky again. And I said, oh my God, we're spiraling. And I thought, this is it. And then I don't remember what happened anymore. When I woke up, I was hanging upside down inside the aircraft. And I opened my eyes and I saw dirt, just gravel, some dirt and some small insects. But I didn't understand what was going on.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to watch the rest of the video on your own, but what could they have done when they started noticing the gap? Do you think that was a smart choice to continue on and then climb? What were some other mitigating factors they could have done? Go ahead, Pam.
Well, I'm not like, I kind of wanted to ask a little bit about the gap that you mentioned. Sorry, because of the wildfires, I've had coughing fits all day. The gap I wanted to ask about, but like when you fly into IMC as a VFR, under VFR, like as a VFR pilot, I would just turn around. I mean, that's what I've been trained to do. Just make a 180 and just like once you enter, leave.
Yeah, absolutely. Make a 180 before you enter, even if you see that it's an overcast layer ahead and it's not clear if it's going to be able to get up and down and do a VFR on top, it's always better to just turn around. Is there anything else they could have done? I mean, he talked about them both being pilots and he didn't want to interrupt him. Was the second pilot actually doing anything to help, or was he just kind of letting the pilot up front decide everything? So maybe some crew resource management, actually saying, hey, do you want to give somebody a call on the radio and see if we can get tops and bases, or if there's any option to go ahead, or if everyone's reporting overcast, that can potentially go all the way down to the ground. So yeah, those were definitely options as well. And maybe consider just not even flying that day. It seemed like the weather wasn't quite capable, or the aircraft wasn't capable for the weather that they were experiencing. So AOPA videos, definitely check those out. They're amazing. And what does everyone use for their flight planning? Do you just basically do it all with paper, or do you use any electronic sources? I personally use ForeFlight, so I know a lot of people are not big fans. Okay, sectional charts in ForeFlight, awesome. So I want to show you something cool. So everybody who doesn't have ForeFlight, there is this free option where you can basically just type in any airport you want. And let's actually do this. So NA, and then you can type in AirMats, SIGMETs, NOTAMs, GPS. It basically gives us a lot of the same tools that FullFlight gives us, but there's no cost associated with it. So I love showing students about this because oftentimes they don't have the budget to invest in FullFlight, which this actually has a kind of cool grid too. So it's got the airports, the ceiling, visibility, wind speed, and temperature. I'll sometimes use this along with ForeFlight just to kind of double check because it's all color coded and it can quickly identify any concerns along the way. It's got all of our METARs right here, and these are collapsible. So if you wanted to see the legend of what they were, it's basically a breakdown VFR, marginal IFR, and low IFR. But we can close these, and we've got our runway links, runway numbers, elevation. So it's really easy to get all that NW craft information in just one view. We've even got approaches if you wanted to check out what the approach looks like. AirMets is a link to the aviationweather.gov website. So we can see we've got an icing AirMet, so Zulu here, and this one's going to be for Sierra, IFR. Looks like there's not a lot of good stuff happening over the mountain ranges here. And we can also see any SIGMETs just by clicking on there. So we've got some convective SIGMETs in the area. And all of the METARs for Lantana Airport. the forecast using PBI because Lantana is a smaller airport. It doesn't have its own METARs. So these are all basically just AWOS observations, so minute weather. And something really important to go through are these NOTAMs. And if we go down to TNT, it's actually closed right now. So all the red, and that's why flight plan or FLT plan is kind of useful because if there's anything you really need to be aware of, it's in bright red. So with ForeFlight, you kind of have to read through the NOTAMs a little bit more and make sure you get every little detail. But this is like airports closed, hey, all in bright red. So it really catches your eye better so that you can go back through a little closer to those areas that are more significant. And we've got our signets down here. Since we all use ForeFlight, we can actually check out a really cool tool in here, which is the profile view. Is anyone familiar with that or used it before? Okay, this is like the higher version of ForeFlight. So when able, I would definitely recommend checking it out. And it looks a little different. I'm used to using it on the phone. So let's see here. Where are you hiding? I think I know what this is. We're in maps instead of flights. That's why. Okay, so we've got our briefing tool. Sure, everyone's familiar with the briefing tool. It basically just brings out a briefing for us. And then same information. The NOTAMs are also in red, but they're a little bit less documented, I've noticed. So we're going to go back to map and figure out why my profile view is hiding here. I might need to show you on my phone instead because I don't see it on here for whatever reason. Okay. Yeah, we'll do that. So, okay, here. Do you guys normally flying in the 150 at Girls Love to Fly, or do you fly other aircraft? Sure. No. It's the strangest thing. I like hid my profile view on here. All right, well, here is a screenshot of profile view because ForeFlight doesn't want to cooperate right now. And it basically is a tool where we can identify airspace, turbulence, icing along our route. Okay, Archer, Seminoles, 172s, awesome. Yeah. There's some kind of permission on my Zoom that's not letting no security. This is what it looks like. And basically we can see all of the different hazards along our route of flight. So if there was a tower or something, it would show us that and the actual altitude that the tower is at. So we can use that for flight planning to avoid turbulence or to avoid icing or cloud layers. So profile view is super handy for that. And another thing that I wanted to share with everyone is the FAA FRAT tool. Are you familiar with using that for planning flights? Okay, cool. I really wish I could just share this document, but that's apparently got to go out by email. I don't use Dropbox, so that was the other option we have for it. And it's actually a Tableau dashboard, which is basically just like a data analysis tool. And we're able to input details for the different flights that we're doing. So basically starts out here with your flight risk assessment. If you have less than 50 hours in the aircraft, so let's just say that's true. And less than 15 hours in the last 90 days, maybe we got really busy and haven't been able to fly. So we'll say that's true too. Less than 6 or 8 hours of sleep prior to the flight, also true. And you can see our risk is changing down here according to what we put into this flight risk assessment tool. So we'll say the flight occurs after work because we're busy and dual instruction received in the last 90 days. We'll leave that as true. Instrument rating, current and proficient, false. And let's add some bad flight conditions. So we've got a crosswind greater than 7 knots. And ceiling is less than 3,000 feet because there's smoke outside. And we're already at a moderate risk just for those additions. So we also are going to consider if it's more than or less than 100 hours in the type of aircraft that you're flying, because that's where the FAA is determined. After 100 hours in a type, pilots become a little bit more proficient. So to change that, it would be up here for experience level. And then we can also change it if we wanted to be an IFR rated pilot. And basically just go through this really briefly. If for some reason we're unsure of the weather conditions, if we call a briefer, they're basically just going to tell us everything that we just read. They can maybe give us some advice, but most of their job is to just explain what the reports say. And then if they're thinking it's going to be IFR, they just say VFR not recommended, but they can't actually tell us what decisions to do. And while I found them helpful for some things like finding the right flight level, a lot of times it's up to the pilot and what they're comfortable with and what their proficiency is. So definitely bring a CFI along or potentially pick a better weather day if you're not so sure it's going to be the best one to do that. And let's go back. We did all of that. Is there any questions so far? Okay, awesome. And if you do want to get ForeFlight, there's 2 options to get a 33% discount. You can either join SAFE, which is the Society of Flight Instructors. Let me actually get you their link because that'll be the easier way. And NAFI. So just safepilots.org, and then NAFI is right here. And I'm gonna just put this document on a Drive link for everyone because that might be the easiest way to do this. So that you'll have all of the resources and be able to access them throughout your training. Has anyone done any weather flying yet? Like actual weather conditions? No? Okay. If you have a chance with a CFI, obviously, or a CFII, and the weather conditions are just marginal, not anything too serious, I highly recommend getting a little bit of instrument time while you're training. So that way, when you're out on your own, it's not just that minimum 3 hours of flight in reference to instruments, because flying in weather is a lot different than just basically flying with goggles on. Because, oh, 3 hours in IMC, Amy, that's awesome. And what advice do you have for anyone who maybe hasn't flown in IMC before? Trust your instruments. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so the big ones with the trusting your instruments are the attitude indicator, and you'll learn this all in your instrument training soon. But look at that attitude indicator, make sure the wings are level, check the altimeter, and that will let you know whether or not you're going to be. Oh yeah, here, let me share this first. Anyone with the link? There you go. That should work now. But yeah, that'll give you all of the resources to click through and get familiar with. Weather is definitely a complicated topic, and the more that we keep learning about it and watching videos about other pilots' experiences, we're able to learn from those without having to go through them ourselves. And Amy's saying she consistently felt like she was in a right bank, but focusing on her instruments kept her level. Yeah, so we've got the leans. There's a lot of cinematographic illusions that make us feel like we're doing something that we aren't actually doing. And another one is to fly at night as often as possible with an instructor or a safety pilot once you're got your certificate and feel comfortable flying without an instructor on board. The more that we're comfortable with night flying, the more we're going to be comfortable with weather flying. And that's just because we have less visibility in both of those. Actually, internationally, pilots aren't allowed to fly at night without an instrument reading. So continue on, study as much as possible. My instructors always told me 3 hours of ground for 1 hour of flight is a good margin, because the ground is the hard part, and you all are doing great by being here tonight and furthering your education in weather. We got a question. Any advice on confidence flying at night? I had a wildlife encounter prop strike, and it's made me super nervous. Well, the only advice I can really say in that particular instance, confidence in general, the more that we are exposing ourselves to something, the more confident we're going to become. But particularly if there's been a situation that was negative, we want to have safety measures for future flying. So if we're going to come into land, maybe assume there could be wildlife on the runway and be ready to go around, be ready to, just go through that checklist mentally when you're coming in, because if it's not wildlife, it could be an airplane that maybe you just blew a tire. And for some reason, the NOTAM hasn't been communicated yet and we're unaware. So I always just treat every single landing as if it's going to be a go around. Carb heat's going to be off as soon as landing is assured, hand on the throttle, and just be ready to retrim for that go around configuration. And then when able, communicate on the radio, but it's always aviate, navigate, communicate. So that's last priority. They'll figure it out, especially at night. Everyone's got their lights on. So take advantage of the runway lights too. Make sure you're clicking for the highest frequency. And another technique I've learned from some pilots are, if you're concerned about wildlife, do a low pass first, because that's most likely going to scare away anything that could be in the runway environment. So don't actually go to land, just go maybe 100 feet off the deck, and then obviously be aware of terrain and trees or anything around there, but basically just go low above the runway, break off, come back around for an actual landing. And at that point, you kind of scoped it out with your landing light and maybe scattered off deer, or we have alligators in Florida. So anything that could be in the way, causing a hazard. But yeah, just the more that we practice anything, the more confident we're going to get in it. And we're going to realize that one situation that we experienced isn't going to dictate every other experience that we have. Any other questions? Okay, awesome. Well, if you do have questions, Skytime with Sam, you can find me on Instagram. I'm always happy to answer anything. And I hope tonight was enlightening in some ways, and we got a lot of tools to use in your toolbox for the future, and good luck with any check rides that you might be having.
Thank you. This was super helpful.
I'm glad to hear it. Have a good night. See you
Good night.